Despite all of the objections from players and content creators, EA employees, labor unions, and several dozen politicians, it doesn't appear that EA or the US government have any plans whatsoever to stop the sale of EA to the Saudi government.
I do. I like them a lot. I like them too much. That's why we give so much, you know? Too much. I like you too much.
I know for a lot of players it's easier to just forget about this whole thing and pretend like it's not a problem, just like the US government's doing with those emails, am I right? But ignoring this whole situation does not change reality. And the reality is that this deal is problematic on every single level. This deal is literally nightmare fuel. The Saudi government and the Trump family are buying EA. That's like if Voldemort and Darth Vader joined forces. We're all in danger. I'm pretty sure most of us can agree that human rights abusers buying one of the largest video game companies in the world is not a good thing. But what if I told you the whole imprisoning and executing innocent people part of this was just one aspect of what makes this deal so awful? Because there's actually something else. And this is something that affects hundreds of millions of people around the world. Yet oddly, no one's talking about it. As the Italians say, it's
vergognoso. Vergognoso.
Vergognoso.
It's vergognoso.
Oh, thanks. In other words, it's super sketchy. It's also a very convoluted topic, which is why I've teamed up with Lady Drama to help tackle this terrifying aspect of the EA buyout.
I mean, we had to join forces for this one because when the buyout proposal was announced back in September 2025, folks were having all kinds of worries. Will they erase gay sims? Will they delete my save files? I mean, my personal first reaction was, I cannot believe Jared fucking Kushner has his hands on this one too.
And
I mean, what an unstoppable diva that man is. But one thing we need to dive deeper into is the weight of the data collection and therefore the consumer's protection. When we talk about the EA buyout, we tend to overlook the opening that this massive deal creates between the center of EA's systems and you. Think about the scrutiny that TikTok, for example, got by the US government compared to the EA's deal. And in that case, the fear with TikTok was about collecting social media usage patterns and demographic information. EA Games access device-level information, network configurations, personal communications through your in-game chat systems, and financial data through in-game purchases. So, what's the US government doing about this?
A few months ago, 2 US senators sent a letter to the Treasury Secretary of the United States expressing profound concern over the pending sale of EA to the Saudi government, citing national security risks raised by the Saudi government's access to and unchecked influence over the sensitive personal information collected from EA's millions of users. In the letter, they urged the US government to scrutinize the deal on the basis of, quote, protecting sensitive consumer data. To give you an idea of how massive a concern this is, in 2023, 700 million people around the world had active EA accounts. That is double the population of the United States. With this deal, the Trump family and the Saudi government will have access to the user data of every single person who's ever played an EA game. This is clearly a terrifying concept for both privacy and security reasons, but it also affects your rights as a consumer. There's a vast amount of information that EA's new owners will have access to, and to give you an idea of what EA's new owners can do with this, Lady Drama has a pot of tea to spill.
I absolutely do. In fact, if we walk back to April 2025, an infamous update to the terms of service of EA's products introduced some controversial changes, baby. I know, yeah, maybe you didn't even notice. I surely did not. But for example, the data collection section now expanded the type of data these guys can get on you. We're talking gameplay statistics, we're talking system information and chat logs claiming to be used for moderation, analytics, and service improvement purposes. I mean, babe, you don't need me to tell you that this means anything and everything, right? Anyways, they also managed to piss off some people with the update, maybe not in the Sims community, but some folks are already paying the real price. Because with this update, they also clarified their account suspension and termination policies. So breaking the rules or the law, whatever that means, can lead to temporary or permanent bans, and depending on severity, all of your EA accounts could be terminated. As a consequence of a new and more rigid anti-cheat system, unjustified bans have been rising in certain communities, and we will get back to this later, so let's put a pin on it, because I have to tell you about their anti-cheat lopsided software, so let's put a pin on it. But one thing that people seem to have noticed already back in April is the right EA has to shut down any service with 30 days notice, meaning a game can lose its online support, stop receiving updates, or even become unplayable on future systems. Yeah, babe, they literally said, go fuck yourself, you own 0% of this game. And Malcolm, I think you've got something to say about that.
I sure do, and let's start here. Some of you may remember this game, The Sims Mobile. It released in 2018, and it was one of EA's many attempts to cash in on the mobile games market. And this time, they kinda hit the jackpot. The Sims Mobile amassed a substantial player base that was willing to spend a boatload of cash on the game's many microtransactions.
The Sims Mobile has come under a lot of fire recently for their cash-grabby monetization. Now, one of these lots costs a whopping $39.99 pre-furnished.
Some players sunk hundreds, if not thousands of dollars into this game over several years. But then, just last month, The Sims Mobile was shut down. Servers taken offline. The Sims Mobile no longer exists. All the time and money players put into this game erased. EA did the same thing with another game called FC Empires, which released in 2024, and then a year later, seemingly out of nowhere, they announced it would be shut down. In its short lifespan, players spent more than $500,000 on this game, but less than a year after its launch, EA took that money and left players with nothing in return. This is the future of video games under EA's terms of service. That's because when you buy a game, you're merely renting a license for that game that, according to the terms of service, can be taken away from you at any moment without notice, without reason, and without reimbursement. I think it goes without saying that this is unethical, it's anti-consumer, and it very well should be illegal. And the same rationale applies to virtual currencies in EA games, which under the terms of use state that they cannot be refunded or returned, even if you never use it. Now, these terms aren't abnormal compared to the way other video games manage virtual currencies, but when we consider this alongside EA's licensing terms, it really makes you wonder, what's the point of spending all that money on a video game if all your progress can be erased in a day's time? All that time and money you spent just vanishes into thin air. EA's new owners are taking out a $20 billion loan to finance this buyout, which means they need to make a hell of a lot more money just to cover the interest on this loan. But when you look at the numbers and consider that live services already account for 70% of EA's annual revenue, it is very clear that EA's new owners will push for even more live service games that are flush with virtual currencies and microtransactions. Live services are their moneymaker. And as we've learned, it's also very convenient for them, because it also means they can use their terms of service to punish you whenever and for whatever they want. So if they randomly determine that a game is too expensive to update or not popular enough, they can simply scoop up all that cash you gave them and close up shop for good. But if you thought it couldn't get any worse than this, it absolutely does.
Now, remember that we left a pin on the anti-cheat system topic. Well, it's time to go back to it, because what does your mind tell you when you hear the word Javelin? I know, it's either that lady from the Matilda movie, or it's your ex's nickname on Apex Legends or something. But also, it's none of those, and it's actually worse than any of them. So back in April 2025, EA proudly gloated about their newest child, an anti-cheat system called Javelin. They described it as, quote, the evolution of our flagship anti-cheat solution, which prevents, identifies, and addresses bad experiences wherever possible. Basically, an upgrade to technology they had already introduced. That's true. But this version is definitely worth talking about, because EA claims it to have an accuracy level of, quote, over 99%. I mean, girl. And players, they beg to differ. But why? Perché? Well, first of all, one thing EA forgets to mention in their little presentation is Javelin's anatomy. This bitch is a kernel-level anti-cheat. And yes, if that's making all of your alarms ring, you are absolutely right, because probably, most likely, you have heard the phrase kernel level related to viruses on your computer. Kernel level is hardcore, honey. It's the highest, deepest access level you can give. It's an absolute privilege you are giving to EA, and they haven't even bought you dinner yet. So it's very simple. Modern computers have two levels of security: user mode and kernel mode. The vast majority of your applications are user mode applications, so they cannot reach anything on your hardware except by asking your operating system to do it for them. The kernel level code instead is how the operating system itself works. Kernel level can do potentially anything on the PC. Read or write any memory and directly write to disk. And very, very important, honey, kernel level code can be exploited if there are bugs in it. I mean, not that EA ever ships anything with bugs, right? Right? Yeah, so we have all met EA. And that's also why learning that EA was installing something that granted them access to do cartwheels inside of your computer, it had people rage. Users weren't happy, and the users are not happy. Because, babe, not only is Javelin problematic because of its invasive access, but it also doesn't perform as well as EA claims it to. I mean, color me shocked. I'll give you an example. So by reading online feedback, I found out that Javelin has some sort of, toxic masculinity going on. You're just hanging out with your friends and he's like, no, you cannot do anything but be with me. Apparently, softwares like Reshade, SteelSeries, GG, Auto, Hotkey make it completely freak out. And because of the way it determines the risk of a user being a cheater, the high sensitivity of this kernel level piece of work breaks anything and everything, from crashing applications to shutting down games out of the blue to imposing players bans that are not justified. This user reported getting banned in Battlefield 6 after the anti-cheat flagged his accessibility tools, and his appeals to EA's support did little to nothing, and he received a copy-paste answer. Quote, "If EA wants a fair playing field, great, so do we, but fair doesn't mean banning disabled players, normal users, and anyone with everyday software installed." I mean, this is crazy, honey. Currently, Javelin is active in 14 EA games, and this group includes titles like the FC series, Madden, Battlefield, and the F1 series. The Sims 4 is not part of this jolly good team yet, but would you be surprised if Javelin's functions expanded to single players as well? Let's say that they wanted to give it free reign to search for pirated copies of the game. It shouldn't be difficult to do that for a software that is basically granted God access to your device, right?
I think it's about time we address the elefante in the room, shall we? The $55 billion that EA's new owners are paying for this company isn't just for the games. They're not just buying the sports games and Battlefield and Apex Legends and The Sims. They're also buying you, your data, your personal information, and access to your computer. 700 million people have active EA accounts. What shady shit are the new owners going to do with the data and private information of those 700 million people? I know there's been a lot of discussion about the human rights aspects of this deal and whether we want our money to go to people who imprison and execute innocent individuals, but even if that part does not bother you, your privacy and security are at risk here, and that should concern everyone. Do you want your private information to be in the hands of the Trump family and the Saudi government? We live in an age where our data and personal information is bought and sold and sometimes stolen. So it's more important now than ever before that we're selective about whom we entrust with our information. And I think most of us can agree that EA's new owners are not deserving of our trust.
Let's do some speculation, baby. Just you and I. So we learned what a bleach blonde, bad-built, butch body the Javelin anti-cheat is. And we also kind of know that the future of the Sims franchise includes the infamous Project Renee multiplayer, whatever that is. And yes, I truly believe they can't wait to see how Javelin performs together with their Fortnite lookalike MMO. That's why I find all the points that we've been mentioning in today's video very telling, even for a community like Sims players who might feel like these issues don't really matter to them. And they do. You're actually getting a window overlooking the future, so make sure you see it. What happens when they end a service for The Sims 4 and make it more difficult for you to play it? You know, you can't do anything about it. It's in the TOS you've already agreed to. What happens when they have a data breach, for example, and you find out a lot of your sensitive information was leaked? You know, you won't be able to do much about it. What happens when Javelin starts thinking that you're cheating in Project Renee and bans you and all of your other EA's accounts for a month? Where does your agency go when you encounter a problem, for example, and you realize that you have already waived all of your rights to a solution?
Look, if all this isn't enough to persuade you to steer clear of EA's games for the end of time, you're either a Saudi royal, one of the Orange Man's minions, or a Sims 4 stan. From human rights to geopolitical issues to privacy and security to consumer rights, there's no filter that can make the buyout less ugly.
Preach, baby.
But you know what's not ugly? Staying informed. So do yourself a favor and keep up to date with the buyout and all the happenings within the life simulation genre by subscribing to The Drama House. She's one of the only many people who has consistently covered the EA buyout, and she also frequently explores a lot of other fascinating topics in the video game space. Informative, entertaining, and a great taste in memes. What else could you ask for? But to wrap things up, I think Lady Drama and I have one more thing to add.
Boycott EA.
Okay, let's set the roof on fire. Step by step, raise the whole room higher. Pick up your step, don't try hard. Down, up, down like a boom bap choir. Turn out the beat, raise up the heat. Kick up your feet like this, like that. Word on the street says you got the heat, so let's see you move like this, like.